Hey boys, welcome back to the next team we're going to be having a look at, and that's the Bulldogs here. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Lineup, let's go. Starting off with Brett Morris at a 90 overall. So if you had told me Brett Morris was a 90 overall like last year, 2 years ago, I would have said that's fucking bullshit, having him as good as Justin Hodges. And I still maybe think it's a little high, but honestly, since he moved to Bulldogs this year and he's playing fullback, he's probably the best footy I've seen him play in his career. He's looked very dangerous, and he's been arguably their best player. So, you know, it's hard to argue with that, but I still feel that maybe that's a touch high, but it's probably warranted. Then we move on to Curtis Rona. I feel like this is a bit low. I've seen a fair bit of Curtis Rona in the Queensland Cup, and he was a good player there. And I feel like for the Bulldogs, he's been solid without showing probably his full potential. You know, he's scored some pretty good tries. But you know, he's a big winger. I feel like if he gets involved, he should get involved a bit more, honestly. But probably at the moment, 73 is pretty right for him. But yeah, I think he's a better player than that. Then we move on to Josh Morris with an 83. And I gotta say straight away, I'm happy. I'm so happy that they haven't put like Brett and Josh Morris the same rating. Because, let's be honest, we all know Josh Morris is the worst twin. There's no doubting that. I mean, it may be because of injury or whatever, but Brett Morris is just... he's overtaking Josh Morris as a better player. One thing I'll point out though that is ridiculous is Josh Morris with the speed of 99. I'm pretty sure the highest speed in the game. How is that even possible? That makes no sense. Honestly, that annoys me a fair bit because, I mean, we'll compare it to Brett Morris. Whether Brett Morris is the fastest in the game, I don't know, but you could argue that he is one of the fastest. Like, he's at 99, I can agree with that. To an extent. Josh Morris at 99? I can't agree with that. There are so many wingers and centers that are faster than Josh Morris, but they're gonna be at the same speed. I just don't understand it. And you can say that maybe it's because of injury, but I still think when Josh Morris was fully fit, he wasn't one of the fastest centers. You know, he was quick, he had good acceleration, but I don't think over the 100 he was as fast as many other backs. But you know, it is what it is. I think 83 honestly is a bit high for Josh Morris. Last year he was awful. This year he started off not much better. I don't know, he just, for me, he's lost his way a bit. He doesn't look as dangerous. Whether that's because of injury or not, I don't know, but I don't think 83 is quite right. Because then we move on to Lafai with 83, and I think Lafai is definitely overtaking Josh Morris, as the strike center for them. You know, if they look like scoring, it's usually over Lafai's side. You know, I really like Lafai as a player. I think he's a great player to watch. You know, he's big, he's quick, he's got good footwork. I'm looking at the stats here, and the footwork's like 55. I don't agree with that. Even the speed, 74. I don't agree with that. Like, how much slower is Lafai compared to Morris? You're saying that he's like way slower? I don't agree with that either. But yeah, Lafai, I feel like 83 is probably about right for Lafai, maybe a touch higher, but I think Josh Morris will move down a bit. And then we move to Sam Parrott with 86. This one I'm a little torn about. I'm not too sure because, you know, I just think of Sam Parrott and I never think of, wow, Sam Parrott like totally took the game away from the opposition team, or Sam Parrott just had an amazing game. But every game you could say Sam Parrott played good. You know, he's solid, he makes some really good runs at dummy half. He's still probably one of the best dummy half runners in the game, and yeah, he's still a solid player, but I just feel like 86 is a bit high. You know, he's not one of the, I don't think he's one of the premier wingers in the game. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Then we move on to one of the more controversial ones, Reynolds with 89. Now, I personally think Reynolds is extremely overrated. You know, don't get me wrong, he's an extremely tough player. He puts on some good hits for a little man. He's aggressive. His defense honestly is pretty good, really good. But his attack, his control of the game is pretty poor in my opinion. And this goes for Hodkinson as well. I feel like they're both a bit high. You know, Reynolds definitely shouldn't be that much higher than Hodkinson to start with, but I feel like they should both be about 80 at the most. Because if you ever watch a Bulldogs game and the Bulldogs win, you know, the odd time it's a Trent Hodkinson field goal, but most of the time it's the forwards getting on top and just steamrolling the opposition. Whenever they're behind, where are their halves? Whenever I watch a Bulldogs games, you don't see their halves touch a ball. And it's like, I don't see how they're rated this high. You know, Hodkinson, he has his days where he's good, but for a halfback, he really doesn't touch the ball very much. He does a bit of kicking, but he doesn't set up the tries like a Ben Hunt per se. And Ben Hunt was, I think, 82 from memory. And you're telling me Josh Reynolds is that much better than Ben Hunt? I don't think so, but that's my opinion on the halves for Bulldogs. I mean, I just feel like Bulldogs win it with their forwards. Their halves just right off the back of that, most games. But then we got Aiden Tolman with a 78, and I think this is pretty much perfect, you know. For the Broncos we had Blair and Maguire with 79, and you know, they're all around that standard. I feel like Maguire and Blair's probably a touch better than Tolman, so having him at a 78 is probably pretty much perfect in my eyes. Michael Leisha, 81. I feel like this is a touch high, you know. I mean, Leisha is he's an 80-minute player now, I think, and he's a good defender. He's very solid in defense, but he's not a dummy half that creates much. Again, when I see the Bulldogs play, you don't see Leisha taking advantage of the quick play the balls. You don't really see him setting up tries like a Farah, like a Smith, like a McCulloch even, you know. I think 80, you know, the low 80s is probably pretty right, but yeah, maybe a touch lower, but it's probably not too bad. Then we move on to James Graham, and again, maybe a bit controversial, I think Graham is extremely overrated, just like Reynolds. And the main reason is the fact I don't think Graham is that much better than Tolman, and I definitely don't think Graham is better than Adam Blair or Josh Maguire, but they've got him here as an 83. You know, again, he's a tough player, and he does some pretty nice plays at times. He does some pretty nice passes to other forwards, but I don't think he's much better than like a Tolman. I think Tolman does pretty much the same game as Graham. It's just that Graham's a lot louder, so people notice him more, and it's just that Graham's like an Englishman, so everyone talks about it. But that's my opinion on Graham, you know. I'm just glad he's not higher. I was expecting them to have Graham like in the 90s almost, God. But I think they had a bit of restraint there. Then we move on to Josh Jackson. You know, here's another one. I think I'm not a massive fan of Josh Jackson, but I feel like Jackson's a better player than Graham. It's hard to judge that because they're pretty different players, but you know, Jackson probably makes more of an impact in attack, and he's always a solid defender, so you know, 82 is probably about right. And then Tony Williams, people might disagree here as well, but I think Tony should be a bit higher. I think he's definitely a better player than James Graham, for sure. But 82, that's a little low. I mean, I think Tony Williams, like last year, the start of last year and probably a couple of years ago, you know, he sort of went missing games. He was a bit lazy, as people say. But I feel like the end of last year and the start of this year, he's really shown what he can do. You know, he's playing more minutes. He seems to be getting involved a bit more. You know, I wish they would just tell him to run. Yeah, they seem to have this thing where they tell Tony Williams to play like a ball player. You know, he's way more damaging when he runs hard. But yeah, I think 82 is a bit low. Like, he can devastate an opposition team with his running ability. It's crazy. He can set up so many tries off the back of some amazing runs. So 82, a bit low. I'd move it up a bit. Greg Eastwood, 86. I think this is a touch high. Don't get me wrong, I think Eastwood was an amazing player. He still is a good player, but I don't think he's got better. I think he's got slightly worse over the years, so to say he's an 86 now, I think it's a little ridiculous. You know, I loved him playing for the Broncos. He was one of the best forwards for the Broncos back then. He had the footwork, he had the speed, he put on some massive hits. But yeah, I just feel like, you know, he's a bit older now. 86 is, I feel like it's way too high. I would just have him around 80, high 70s even. But yeah, Greg Eastwood, I still love him. He's still an amazing player. I still love watching him. Then the bench. So Sam Cassiano. You know, I agree with this. I agree with the 83 rating. I think he's their most damaging front rower. He's very impactful. The only thing I don't agree with is this stat right here, fitness of 92. I don't really understand how that makes any sense. Like, I don't think he's an unfit player, but he's probably one of the most unfit players in the Bulldogs team. Like, you're telling me he's fitter than, like, Tony Williams, Greg Eastwood. He's as fit as Michael Leisha, pretty much. Leisha plays 80 minutes, Cassiano plays 20 minutes stints at the most. Yeah, I don't agree with that, but I agree with the 83. David Clemmer, 76. Yeah, I probably agree with that as well. That's probably pretty good. Not much else to say about that. You know, David Clemmer, he's an up-and-coming player. He's another big forward. Not a bad player. You know, he played for Australia, which I thought was ridiculous, but, you know, he got a bit lucky there, but I think he'll grow into a pretty good front rower. Moses Mbai. Now, this is funny because I feel like Moses Mbai, you know, when they've got him at 5'8", I feel like the Bulldogs are a lot more dangerous. I think Moses Mbai is a better player than Reynolds. That's my honest opinion. I rate Moses pretty highly. I think he's a really good player. So I would have him in the 80s, the low 80s. Not much higher, but probably low 80s. And then we have Frank Pritchard with 83. Again, I feel like this might be a bit high because as Frank's got older, I think he definitely hasn't got better. I think he's like Greg Eastwood, he's got a bit worse over time. You know, he still comes on with a bit of impact, but he definitely isn't what he used to be. But yeah, that's the Bulldogs. One thing actually, the other thing I'll show, I didn't show this with Broncos, but I'll start doing this, is the jerseys. So let's have a look how good the jerseys are. So there's the home, the alternate, and the heritage. So, okay, so I didn't really know what the heritage looks like, but I like that. So yeah, the jerseys look pretty good. So yeah, that's the Bulldogs done. So I'll see you boys next time.